So the canvas place goes to that vase of flowers.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Male and Guardian webinar. Thanks to our very generous sponsors, Dr. Reddy's, for sponsoring this webinar on such an important topic. Just a few days away from schools going back and from South Africa going back to level 3 or alert level 3 on Monday, the 1st of June. Thank you so much for everyone joining us this afternoon. It's amazing to see so many people who have registered, and it's great to see everyone joining us from literally across the country. So good afternoon to everyone. While everyone starts to join the meeting and the webinar, I'd like to welcome our wonderful experts this afternoon. And thanks again for your time. Just a reminder to everyone joining us is please do post your questions in the chat box. Please also know that this webinar is recorded, so there will be a video available after the session that you're able to share and refer to afterwards. So please know that it will all be available. So this afternoon, I'm going to introduce our 3 experts who are joining us from around Gauteng today. First and not the least, Dr. Cindy van Zyl, who is a practicing GP, has also a social media influencer where she uses the platform and online mediums to share important health topics, including mental health, and is also, kindly to say, also a mom. So is able to give some insight on that perspective as well. We've also got Dr. Gloria Marseille, who's an educational psychologist and really specializes in consults for schools, educators and teachers. And during lockdown has been working very closely with teachers and providing support and resilience training to them. We've also got Candace Cohen, a clinical psychologist and cognitive behavioral therapy expert who specializes in children and anxiety. So today, this afternoon, we're really going to unpack the topic with going back to school, both for the mental health and emotional resilience of our educators and teachers, parents and children. And I think it's incredibly important as we're just a few days away from going back to school and addressing it. So welcome, everyone. I really appreciate we're hitting just over 800 people, and I think people are still logging in. So thank you very much for joining us. I think the purpose of today's webinar is also really important, as we've seen so many different articles and discussions and interviews about this important topic, which is both, controversial and sensitive and complex and difficult, but it's an important discussion to have so that we can also start framing and providing practical support and tips going forward. Today's webinar is not about what policies should change, how the guidelines should be different. It's really about focusing on what we can do to both prep parents, both prep educators and teachers, as well as providing support to learners. This afternoon, we're going to be unpacking some of those anxieties, understanding the impact on mental health and emotional wellness, and really equipping parents to help manage their own anxiety, as well as how to help their children cope, whether they're children or teenagers, and supporting and empowering educators and our school leadership as well as on practical tips that they can do and use on their school grounds and in their classrooms. And I think also providing self-help techniques and tips for children to manage anxiety. So without further ado, as we're seeing more and more people join us, I'd like to open the floor to our great experts. And perhaps, Dr. Cindy van Zyl, we can start with you on just kind of framing your experience. I know you've been working throughout lockdown, as well as helping the kids with homeschooling. Perhaps from your practice and experience, maybe you can just share a little bit about what you've seen parents or children battling with or struggling with during this time.
Thank you, Cassie. I think there's 2 things around COVID-19. It's the fact that it's a new disease and we are all learning as we go along. So there's nothing for us to draw back from. There's nothing for us to look back and say, oh, we've done this before and this is how we came about it. So that's been very challenging for me as a medical doctor and certainly as a parent. And the second thing, of course, has been managing the fear around COVID-19. So a lot of us are scared because we know of all the reports that we were seeing from China, from Europe, and from America. So every day we get updates on how many people are sick, how many people have passed away, and it's generated a lot of fear in our hearts. So my whole thing, whenever I give a talk or I give input around COVID-19, it's just two things. One, it's a new disease. So a lot of things are going to change the more information we get. Number two, you need to manage your fear around COVID-19. And the nice thing is that we know what to do to protect ourselves in the best way possible to not get COVID-19. So we the World Health Organization, the health department, everyone has an understanding of what we can do to protect ourselves. So in everything we do, if we follow those basic principles, right? If we make sure that you're wearing your mask, if you make sure that you're washing your hands, if you make sure that you're social distancing and you've got your hand sanitizer, you should be okay. And if you do get COVID-19, it's important for me to say that most people will get a mild infection. Right, the majority of people will get it. You'll probably stay at home for 2 weeks, isolated from your family, and then after 2 weeks, we'll check you again. And if you're negative, then you can go back out there and be with everyone else, as you know, in as much as social distancing allows. So it's not that everyone that gets the virus is going to get very sick. And this is where I'm appealing to people in the media that when you report on COVID-19, yes, we need to know how many people have been infected and we need to know how many people have died. But I think in between that, we need to also know how many people are asymptomatic, how many people are recovering, how many people were admitted, and of those admissions, how many of those ended up in ICU. And once you have that spectrum in your mind, it kind of settles your heart, right? And this is what I've been trying to get people to do, especially my patients. The majority of my patients are living with HIV, and you can imagine when you hear a story that, oh my gosh, the people that are at risk are HIV, asthma, and so on. Whenever you hear the word HIV, you're thinking, if I get COVID-19, I'm going to die. And that is not true. That is not true. So that's really what I've been focusing on. I think I've done a good job in my household. I've done a good job in my immediate family. And I'm hoping that with more and more of these platforms, we can get people to understand that, yes, I may get COVID-19, but I'm not going to die.
And I think that's so important to also just frame, because I think, when we're bombarded with media and social media and WhatsApp groups and people sharing information, you can't help but feeling overwhelmed and anxious about the information that you are seeing that is making viral connections. And I think it's a really important topic that as parents, as educators, as teachers, and even as learners, that we filter how much we're reading and always focusing and being critical of what we're reading. Sorry, I'd love to then come to you and pose, because I know you've been doing a lot of work and setting up a lot of support for educators going into prepping for going back to school. And I know on the discussion on the chat, I can see we have lots of teachers and educators and school leaders joining us today, which I think is so fantastic. From your experience of what you've currently seen, what are some of the struggles and anxieties that teachers are feeling about going back to school?
Thank you for inviting me to be on this panel. It really is a privilege. I want to firstly say that our educators are essential service providers in the same way as our healthcare providers are there and they're frontline. Our educators need to have the recognition and the support as essential service providers, because they are certainly in that double jeopardy situation. I think that it's very important for them to understand that they need to take care of themselves. So it's about developing self-care strategies for you as educators, and you as educators are very often parents. So you wear a lot of different hats. So manage yourselves and be good role models. And I think that one of the most important things that brings down our anxiety is to have specific plans in place. One of the difficulties that the educators that have expressed to me that I've been working with in the last couple of weeks have been that, rules seem to change from moment to moment, and there's a lot of confusion about what to do, what's safe, what's not safe, what should we do, how should we do it. And that, I think, is causing great anxiety for educators, because they are now taking care of children, and some of them really quite little children. And then, of course, the big grade 12 question, how are we going to get these learners through this exam? So those are the anxieties that are facing our educators. And I really do emphasize that I think that we as a society need to give credit to our educators who do an amazing amount of work, and really good work, helping our society to move forward and to train these young people who are the future citizens of our country. So my heart goes out to all of the educators that are listening today. Just please take care of you so that you can carry on taking care of the children of our country and our grandchildren.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important message, and thanks for highlighting that. And I think also we forget, and I think as a mom myself, we always appreciated our educators and teachers, but then having to try and manage work and also trying to homeschool our learners, I appreciate them even more. And it's a special calling that teachers have. And I think it's really important that we focus that they also need support and help going into this, because they're also dealing with their own anxieties and struggles. And I'd love to unpack that further in the discussion as well, so that we can make sure that we're supporting them. The ongoing recurring theme and that we're seeing a lot around mental health and frontline healthcare workers and even educators is putting your own oxygen mask on first and then putting on the oxygen mask of someone else. And I think you've got a teacher who's having to do it for themselves and 20 to 30 other children in their classroom. So I think that's an important topic. And I'd like to come to now, Candice. You specialize in anxiety in children. Have you seen in your practice an increase or more parents feeling anxious? I mean, what are we picking up during this time? How are kids coping with anxiety?
I think it's been thanks so much for having me and for Mail and Guardian for hosting this today. I think it's so important for us to talk about it ahead of the schools going back, because it's been quite an interesting time. I think what's happened in South Africa, there was a sudden change in routine. If you think about it, schools closed on the 18th of March. Suddenly, people didn't really have a lot of time to prepare. It wasn't holiday time. Schools just closed. And parents were having to be at home, which is also changing routine. Some kids are really used to their structures and their daily routines, going to school, seeing their parents. That all changed suddenly. And I think then came the unknown of the scary pandemic. And I think a lot of kids do feel anxious about the unknown. We can't see it, we can't touch it, we're hearing about it, we're hearing sensational news about it, people are dying. It's very scary for a lot of kids to process the concepts of death and illness. And here they're being forced with the lockdown, which is we're essentially saying that you need to approach the world with trepidation. Really be careful, be in lockdown, the world is unsafe. And I think that's been so hard for kids to try and comprehend and understand, and not a lot of time to process that. Then obviously being in lockdown has been mentally tough on all of us, from parents to kids. I think that has been good quality time for some families, but parents, either salaries have been cut, they've been financially affected, their job losses. There's all of those factors that have played into parental mental health, which essentially then affects kids and the quality of what's happening at home. I think kids are expected to do online schooling, which is a completely new realm for a lot of kids, with then the challenges of do I have access to internet, and how do I get these resources? There's been that challenge as well. And our kids are, last week Sunday, you're going back to school, so now once again, suddenly you have to get ready. And I think that kids have a lot of emotional roller coaster feelings of, I'm really looking forward to seeing my friends because I've potentially missed them quite a lot, but I'm also unsure of how safe is it to go, because everyone's still telling me to be careful. So I think in general, kids' anxieties have increased. And I think different ages, younger kids might be more excited just to see friends, and lockdown's been hard, not seeing friends. Older children, I think, realize actually what's going on and safety issues, so their kind of hesitancy about going back. So I think it really has affected from parents down to children.
Yeah, and I think it also, everything that you're saying, I think just as a parent, as a person myself, we go through their own emotions and those own anxieties and roller coaster our feelings. And as you're saying, every time it changes, so our response has to change. To really touch on, there's so many different themes that we have to tackle. And again, if this was a 10-part series, it would be great. We could have the whole afternoon unpacking this. And we are going to be posting up a poll soon, which I encourage all the participants to go and, fill in the questions. And towards the end of the webinar, we'll share some of those results just to give people a platform to share some of their anxieties and what are they worried about. And it's really great to see so many people participating from across the board. We have educators, we have healthcare professionals that provide support, parents, social workers. It shows you how many people, when we talk about it takes a village to bring up a child, this is the village. Exactly. So how do we support and equip that village, which I think is really important. So I wanted to tackle now for parents, and I think you touched on it, Candace, on the safety. We're all going back now to school. We've got grade 7s and matrics and then the phased approach. Dr. Cindy, from your tips and tools for a parent, and I know we have so much information and sometimes it's an information overload about safety, but what can we as a parent do to equip or have that conversation with children about COVID, going back to the classroom? What can we do about that?
So really, I think this weekend is going to have to be spent with, you need to be training your child around social distancing and what needs to be done. So if your child has not left the house at all since lockdown started, then this weekend is the training weekend. So maybe take your child to the mall and show them how it's going to be, at school, where, there'll be temperature checks. I mean, some of the stores are doing temperature checks, so they'll need to understand that you may have to stand in front of someone who's going to scan your face, see how your child responds to walking around with other people with a mask on, and how does your child respond to distancing, keeping distance between each other. So this is the weekend to talk to your child, to do a bit of training, do a bit of practicing, and then take it from there. And what you need to understand is that kids adapt, right? Our kids are way more adaptable than we are, right? So yes, it's hard for them, but within a week or two, they'll be used to the new routine. What we need to do as parents is just make it easy for the teachers, because the teachers are also going through their own issues. So if your school says, please make sure that your child brings in a mask, please take a mask to school. If your school says, can your child come with a shield, then please get a shield. So do everything that you can on your part as a parent to make this easy for the educators as well, because it's not easy for them, right? I don't know that if every educator is entirely happy about this, but we do accept that life is going to have to hobble along initially, and eventually we need to just get back to how our new normal is. So please make sure that your kids understand why there's going to be a new normal. As far as socializing is concerned, this is now difficult for us parents. I mean, we bring up our kids to be sociable creatures. Be nice to everyone. Make sure you hug your friends and so on. So now you're telling them a new message. Now you're saying to them, okay, guys, when you get to school, no hugging, no touching. But again, giving the context of that. As long as they understand that there's this virus that we don't want you to get, because, we don't want you to get sick. We don't want mommy and daddy to get sick. We don't want Gogo to get sick. Kids will understand it's okay. I'm not being antisocial. I'm protecting myself, and I'm protecting my friends. So frame it in a positive way. We are protecting each other until this pandemic is behind us, and they should get it. I think the toddlers, the grade 1s and the grade 2s are going to be the biggest problem, but everyone else should be okay. Grade 7s and grade 12s have no excuse not to adhere to the rules and regulations. They understand much better than the little ones.
Yeah. And I think that's really helpful, because I think even some of the comments that are coming forward is, before, exactly what you're saying, be social and interact. And now we're saying going back to school, and it's going to look completely different. We're going to have social distancing, we're going to have space, people are going to wear masks. And that in itself is scary and different and change. Candace, maybe you can help us with some tips with, I think, just prepping from an anxiety level, going in as a parent, having this conversation, prepping them how it is going to be different in the new normal. What else can we be doing to really help manage that stress, and I think also that reaction that they'll have to going into the classroom and it all looking really different? How do we help our children with that anxiety?
Cassie, I really think that parents need to also become aware that our kids actually might be displaying different behaviors now during this time going back to school. And I do think that looking out for anxious behavior is quite important. I think parents need to understand that we all, at some level, adults and kids, we're all feeling uncomfortable. We're all unsure about this new normal that we're going into. It's unfamiliar. And for kids specifically, they might present physically. So they might get tummy aches and headaches. That's to look out for. That could be anxiety behavior. They could have a bit of reluctance going back to school, not wanting to go. Or when you get there might be a lot of clinginess. These are all signs that kids are feeling unsure and a little bit anxious. And I think once we're aware of that, we can respond. And I think before kids go back already, exactly what Dr. Bansal was saying was that we need to prepare them. We need to start talking about it. I think a lot of parents have a bit of fear of, I shouldn't talk about it, or it's going to create more anxiety. We should actually be talking about what the COVID is, what the safety procedures are. The more we talk and familiarize them, the more certain they'll feel. It's a bit of predictability, which is very important for anxiety in kids. And I think if we name things and we say to them, when you go back, there's going to be these safety procedures, like in the shops, at school, this is what's going to happen. They know what to expect and they can adjust themselves accordingly. I think that parents can really start opening up times to check in with kids more frequently. We're going back to school, forgive them for certain behaviors, because it could be just because it's this whole system is upside down for them at the moment. So check in with them and say, how have you been feeling? What are you worried about? What are you looking forward to? Open up conversations where kids can say, well, actually, I really miss my friends, but I'm very worried I can't hug them, and speak to them about that. As a parent, often role modeling is the most important thing. So you can really say to your kids, well, when I was going back to work, it was really hard for me to also know what to do. I was a bit confused, a bit worried, and I did this, so just kind of help role model for kids. It really helps them to problem solve. And really just check in a lot in terms of what's going on, anxiety symptoms and create that emotional space for them to open up.
And I think that's really helpful. And I think, some of the questions that I'm even seeing, do we give our children masks or shields? And, these are practical things that I think as parents, we also assume, or I think we're very aware that we don't always have all the answers. And I think sharing and finding out what is working, what works for your child, and remembering what works for you doesn't always work for them. And I really like the idea of having these conversations. And then bringing in that angle, sorry, I must say, with regards to some children who are not very verbal or very expressive, and that might find this all too overwhelming, do you have any tips and tools for parents and educators on how to identify any children who aren't very expressive or perhaps have, intellectual disability or learning difficulties? What specific things within the classroom should we be looking for?
So yes, I think firstly we need to understand that children are not adults, so they don't have the cognitive ability and the maturity to verbalize exactly what it is that they're feeling. So one of the things is to perhaps have a chart where there's the feelings displayed, and each feeling has a different color, and the child can then have a different flag that shows that this, perhaps the red flag is the I'm really distressed flag, and a green flag is I'm okay. And I think we're going to put that up in our resources later on. So that's one thing. And the other thing is that I think that one of the main worries of educators at this stage is how they're going to deal with these masks, especially for little people. So little children need to be comfortable, because wearing a mask for an extended period of time, I don't know about you, but certainly around my ears or around my nose, there's a little bit of discomfort. We need to understand that. So let's allow our children, as educators in the classroom, let's allow our children to wear masks that are comfortable for them, and to help them to have masks that are comfortable for them. So this is also an appeal to parents to supply your children with a mask that is comfortable. So try on a couple of different ones, ones that go around the ears, ones that tie around the back, a shield, whatever it is that is most comfortable, because otherwise the children are going to be touching their faces and touching their masks all the time. Another thing that educators have said to me that they're a bit worried about is how are they going to organize children eating, because you can't eat with a mask on. but you also can't allow children not to eat. So then what do they do with their masks? So you need to have very specific plans and do that and go through the plans day one so that each child knows exactly what it is that is expected of them. And then in terms of expression, Cassie, I think that it's wonderful for the first couple of days back at school to forget about the curriculum. It's not about the curriculum. This time now is about making adjustments to our new situation, whatever our new normal is, and we don't know what our new normal is going to be. But to allow children to enter into fun activities, so self-expressive things like art, music, movement. Get those little bodies moving, because we need to get the anxiety out of those bodies, which is also difficult in a confined space. I do understand that, but let's just for the moment, not worry about curriculum, but worry about the social and emotional skills that our children need to learn. So there's some wonderful scholars who, even last year before COVID, were talking about the 3 R's, writing, reading, and arithmetic. Yes, they are very important. So don't get me wrong. They are very important. But I think the skill that is coming to the fore at the moment that supersedes those is the skill of relationship building. That skill, so that R, the 4th R, of relationship building. We've had 2 months now where we've been away from each other. This concept of social distancing has been a difficult one. I prefer to call it physical distancing, because us and all these, how many are there participants now? We're all physically distant from each other, but socially we're connected. So we need to just focus on those skills of socially connecting in a physically distant way, so that we don't need to hug and embrace and have physical contact with each other in order to have social contact. So it's just switching to a different way of being. And I think that these are the skills that need to come to the fore, especially in the first week or so of schooling. And then, of course, to manage the grade 12 anxieties and the grade 12 parents' anxieties of what is to come in the future. But if we have a plan, and I think that this is my way of dealing with anxiety, is to have a specific plan that is doable, and not perhaps just one plan, but have a plan A and a plan B, so that we at least have a structure and a routine in which we can work, because that gives us security.
And I think that's so important, is about having a plan and feeling equipped. And I think, sorry for the noise. I think what's really important is that we forget that as teachers or educators, you're also your own person, your own anxieties, you're looking after your own families, and then you're also going and looking after your children, your learners in the classroom. And having that plan, we often assume that our educators are counselors or psychologists, and now they're also having to be, PPE officials. And I think it's equipping them. And as a parent, we wear many different kinds of hats. Is go and print that info, read that info. And it's so lovely to see on the chat, so many different people are sharing resources or tips, or this mask worked for me. And I think that's the power of communication, is sharing that. And I encourage, parents, I know there's been many WhatsApp groups, but starting a WhatsApp group and sharing this helpful information so we can learn from each other. Teachers beforehand having a WhatsApp, sharing with their colleagues, I think is really, really key, especially going into going back to school. And while we've got the graded approach now with grade 7s and matric starting on Monday, we also have a lot of learners who are perhaps starting to do homeschooling or e-learning. Dr. Cindy, I know you've had some experience with this. What have been some of the challenges, and how have you overcome some of them during lockdown?
I think the biggest challenge was me. I think I wasn't prepared with the amount of input that is needed to homeschool children, and I certainly wasn't prepared for the fact that my kids, because I'm not their teacher, and I was trying to pretend to be a teacher. It just didn't work. We ended up sleeping the one day. I was like, you know what, guys, I'm tired. So we went to bed and we slept. So I had to accept that, okay, this is not my forte. I'm very good at other things, but I'm not good at this. So eventually I roped in a friend of mine. So she's been helping my kids via Zoom. So Zoom has been wonderful. And she's been helping my kids. So I initially felt guilty. Obviously, I felt bad about abdicating parenting yet again, But after a while, I thought to myself, well, their work is continuing. We're submitting the work to the school. And my friend is doing a way better job than I'm doing, and that's okay. What do we want? I want my kids to continue at school. So the guilt issue is something that a lot of parents are going to have to deal with. If you keep a child at home and your child is unhappy about being at home, if you send your child to school and they're unhappy about being at school, you are going to feel guilty here and there. But just find a way of working through it and just understanding that we're all going through this together. So it helps me to go onto Twitter and then I tweet about this, and other parents come on and they tell me how they're falling apart. So knowing that we're all falling apart makes me happy because I know that I'm not in this alone. But guilt is something I had to deal with. But as I said, my friend is helping me. I'm privileged to have a friend that can do that, and that's really changed our lives. They are missing their friends, but what I did explain to them is that because I'm the one that goes out and does the groceries, I'm the one that goes out to see patients, I'm the one that goes to the radio show, I'm the person most likely to come back with COVID-19. And I can deal with myself. I can deal with me being admitted into a facility. I can deal with being isolated for 2 weeks in a hospital if I have to. I can deal with going to ICU, but I wouldn't be able to deal with them if that happened. And that's really what I got my family to understand, that the reason why I'm going to keep you guys at home is because mommy can only deal with one COVID-19 stressor in her life, and that's myself. But I couldn't imagine my son being in hospital or my husband being in hospital and I can't see them. That kind of stuff just wouldn't work for my emotions and my strength. And this is what you also need to consider, is that what would you be able to handle? Because people forget that if you are admitted with COVID-19, you will not see anyone. The only people you're going to see are the doctors and the nurses and the cleaners and everyone else in head-to-toe PPE. So you won't see their faces. You won't know who's smiling, who's not smiling. It's just eyes only and masks and shields and so on. And that's it. You won't be able to make phone calls and things like that. So so I'm not trying to make you scared. I'm just trying to get you to understand how I reached my conclusion of not sending my kids to school. I can only deal with one stressor, and that's myself.
And that's such an important topic, around that anxiety and fear, because normally the fear that we feel around anxiety is often not realistic or real. And Candace, around COVID, it's very much a real fear. All of these different aspects that we've never had to think before. And I think whether you're an educator, a parent, or a learner, how do we manage that fear in a way that both make sure that we protect ourselves, we're realistic about the virus, but how do we manage that fear so that we don't feel like we can't do anything or we get overwhelmed by that? What tips would you give to a parent or a teacher who's walking into a classroom on Monday or for her learner? What can we do to manage that?
I think our brains, as you say, Cassie, it's a real threat. It's a real danger. Our brains, our fight and flight response in our brains respond to what potentially could cause us harm, bodily harm or death, and I think that we're all in fight and flight mode with this pandemic, and it's hard to disengage from that system in our brain sometimes when we are anxious. There's worry and then there's excessive worry. So I think the fine line between I'm worried about this real danger and there's lots of information going around, and yes, I need to protect myself and be hygiene conscious, but there's excessive worry.
I think it's just frozen for... I think we just have a technical glitch. Sorry, Candace, I lost you for a second there. Are you back? Sorry.
Yes, I'm back. Where did you leave me? Where did I leave you off?
The worry and excessive worry, if you can just touch on that.
So for us, there's worry. So there's a real amount of worry that we should be concerned and we should be hygiene focused and bodily aware and social physical distancing. But then there's excessive worry, where worry then is all day. You know, it's almost, there's no boundaries about how much time we're spending thinking about it. We wake up, we think about it, we watch TV, we think about it, we go to bed thinking about it. And I think that amount of worry makes us feel emotionally reactive, and it makes us irrational. So what happens then is we start to say, well, I can't see anybody, or the world is really dangerous and I can't do anything. That's going to limit our functioning. And we really need to, at some point, normalize the worry, because yes, it is a pandemic, but really focus on fact-based information about COVID. What you can do to take control is focus on what you're doing right now to protect yourself. So focus on your safety things, your hygiene, your body awareness, your masks and shields that you're implementing, and just be aware of that. I mean, we're essentially teaching our kids to be hyper-focused on their body, you know, and of their surroundings, you know, so we're teaching them that, but we're normalizing it. And I really like what Dr. Marseille said, that we really need to try and get them to a space where they're not spending too much time thinking about it, but also distracting them with more positive, pleasurable activities, right? So getting them to engage in different kinds of thinking. So if I had a child in therapy that was excessively worrying about COVID-19, you can hear it because kids talk about it a lot. It comes up a lot. They ask a lot of excessive questions that are quite extreme. That's indications that kids are quite anxious about it. With that, what I would do is I would put almost a time limit on how much we worry about COVID, give them the space to talk about it, but say, let's talk about it at this time. You know, at second break, come to me and we'll sit and we'll talk about it, and have a time-based conversation with them, answer their questions as factually as you can, and remain calm yourself. You know, if you're not that sure about COVID and you feel quite anxious, it's going to come across to the kids. So I think check in terms of how you're feeling about it, what you know about it, get the information and relay it to kids in a digestible way, and help them name things. I think oftentimes when kids are talking about COVID, they're really expressing that they're worried or they're nervous or they're sad, they can't see their friends. Help them with naming certain emotions. Like you said earlier, certain kids can't express that. So sometimes we need to help name it for them. Naming is really taming with anxiety. So the minute we can call it and identify it, it really does simmer down the anxiety. And then obviously parameters like timing, how much it's being spoken about, how much exposure kids are exposed to.
That's really practical. And as you're saying it, I think there's a lot of techniques that we as parents and adults can also deal with. And I think role modeling, trying it out ourselves, testing it out. And I think that's really, really key. Dr. Cindy, you've mentioned earlier about the decision, and I've seen even on the group chat, people are asking, you know, as a parent, I'm really worried about my child and I've made the decision not to send them back. And often that comes with a lot of guilt, shame, uncertainty, because we've never had to make these decisions before. Maybe you can give us some insight from your perspective, how we as parents, on top of dealing with everything else, is we're managing, you know, our safety of our children and dealing with that guilt.
That's for me.
Yeah, sorry, yes, for you.
Well, look, as you say, Cassie, the important thing is to understand that we are in uncharted territory. I'm sure everyone's tired of hearing that word, that phrase, but this is for all of us. None of us have been down this road before. So yes, the guilt is going to be there. Sometimes you're frustrated. Sometimes you wake up and you just wish this will go away. And I'm just taking it day by day, because I mean, I have a therapist I speak to, and you know, we are just taking it day by day. There's nothing else to be done. So when the guilt comes, I deal with it. I talk about it. Sometimes I cry, sometimes I sleep. And then I get up, I remember, I'm not alone in this. You know, then I tweet about it. And as I said, all the other mommies that are unraveling come online, and that makes me feel much better about myself. But it's good to remember that you are not alone in this. We need to keep reminding ourselves of this. If this had been done before, we'd have all the answers and we wouldn't be worried about anything. But it's new for us, it's new for you, it's new for everyone.
And I think, you know, before do you want to add to that, Dr. Marseille?
I do want to add to that because, Dr. Cindy, you brought up a wonderful way of dealing with this, and that is about pooling resources. And I think more and more we need to pool our resources as parents and as educators, so that we rely on ourselves as a community to actually pull us through this. We're not individuals. Yes, we're in the same storm, we're all rowing the same boat, but we all want to reach the same destination. And I would like to encourage people to pool resources as much as they can, because we do have those resources. And on that point, I want to emphasize how there are amazing people that have done unbelievable work. So the one is a gentleman called Ethel Williams, who's written a book which is freely available on the internet. All you need to do is Google Oakie, like the thing that comes from an oak tree is called an acorn. It's about two little acorns that talk about the virus. And so that's a wonderful book for young children, our early childhood development, to help them to understand what this thing called the virus is. And then there's another book that is an accumulated book written by people and then published by UNICEF. And it's also freely available on the net. It's called My Hero Is You. And the wonderful thing about this book is that it helps to bring down anxiety, because children meet, and children of different cultures meet in a fantasy journey, but they also speak specifically about themselves being ill and recovering. And I think that is a message that we need to get through to all of us, is that, yes, some people are dying, but most people are recovering from this. So, yes, we should be careful, but, let's begin to make our fears realistic so that our children can just, allay part of that fear of, if I get this thing, I'm going to die. It is not true. And this book called My Hero Is You has been published by UNICEF, and it's freely available on the net. Please, I encourage educators as well to go and have a look. The Oakie and the virus is also written in a couple of different languages. So it's written in English, Afrikaans, and isiZulu, and Sesotho, and Setswana. So it really is a wonderful book to just get children to understand on their level, age appropriately, what this thing is about. And it's a wonderful tool.
Thank you. And I can see everyone again on the chat is sharing. And I think, as a parent as well, we forget that we don't have all the answers. We haven't dealt with this, like you've said, Dr. Cindy, and we're not equipped with how to manage it, because if we did, no one would feel stressed and anxious, and it would be fine. And I think it's learning as our children are learning, and adapting as our children are learning and adapting. And I think, everyone sharing. As a parent, you can actually watch the book or read the book with your child and to share that. And also being very aware. We're all sitting in our comfortable homes. We have access to the internet. We're sharing. We're doing homeschooling. There is a big proportion of South Africans who don't have these resources and on the ground don't have these mechanisms. And I think it's a really important conversation. I've been seeing amazing things on, again, social media, the benefits of social media, where parents are doing amazing things to help other parents. Again, the village is getting bigger and more connected, and printing resources. And you have Googles that are reading stories via WhatsApp voice notes, and amazing what is happening. But I think, Candice, what I'd really love before I go to the amazing topics is, what do we practically do when our child is feeling anxious, and even sometimes us as individuals? What do we do when we see that they're really anxious, really overwhelmed in that moment? How do we bring down those anxiety levels, which could be helpful for teachers when they're in a classroom, even to start the lesson with some of these relaxation or tips? Any ideas?
So here the oxygen first mask comes in play here. So as a teacher or a parent, you need to take a breath first, because often when we see an anxious or distressed child, we immediately want to respond. And in that moment before responding, just take a breath yourself. Just pause, quickly take a breath, get down to the child's level, right? So figure out with the child, say, I can see you, verbalize, I can see that you feel quite worried or you look quite stressed. Obviously you're going to see what's happening with the child. They'll either correct you or they'll say yes. And then you say, well, what can we do to help you feel a bit better? And you give them options. Kids like options. They don't know themselves how to solve problems, right? So here comes your breathing techniques, or here comes, well, why don't we draw how you feel, or why don't we take some time out and go sit in the corner, choose an activity that might feel good, do it for a bit, and then come back and we'll talk, right? educate them about what's going on in their body. So you might say things like, I can see you quite worried, your heart might be a little bit fast, your tummy might be a bit sore. That's all part of what anxiety does. When we feel worried or when our body feels a bit stressed, that is what happens. It does go, it's our brain's way of telling us that we need to do something. Once we can do something to feel better, breathe or an activity, come back and talk to them about it and see, and then let them go. After that, don't linger and don't see, oh, my child's anxious, how do I take him? Kids will be fine. Let them go, and they can come back if they are feeling a bit anxious. Give them a bit of space to breathe. Just having that touching base, checking in with them in a calm way does help bring down their anxiety, and that's where that role modeling really comes into play.
Thank you. And then I'm really wanting to get to the chat because the questions are really amazing, and I want to give some feedback. And we were talking a lot about younger children because obviously they're battling more. And I think with teenagers now going back, it's a different kettle of fish. And Dr. Cindy, do you have any tips on how differently we should be talking to teenagers or trying to connect with them during this time? Any ideas of what we can actually say and do to help teenagers cope better?
I think with the teens, they've been prioritized to go back to school because of their curriculum. So they're important. They've been picked out by the government to go back to school before everybody else. So they need to take this seriously. They need to take this going back to school seriously, and just to remember that they need to keep their social distancing. There's nothing cool about not wearing a mask. So if they can get that into their minds now, that wearing a mask is very cool and they have to keep those masks on, they should be okay. But they've been handpicked because we are concerned about their grades. So that's important to say. I think for the youngsters, I see a lot of people are concerned about how do the little ones keep their masks on. And I think what Gloria said is it's all about the comfort. So I have very small ears. So when I wear the masks that clip behind your ears, it flies off literally flies off like a sling. But now I have masks that go behind my head, right? So just check your child's ears, check your child's head, and see that the mask is comfortable. Because those other ones, the ones that go behind the ears, are not for everybody. If you have big ears, they work. If your ears are tiny like mine, they don't work. And then make the masks fun if you can. If you can get pink ones, if you can get a mask with the favorite cartoon character, that will also make a difference. And then if your child is still touching and fiddling and so on, then don't send your child back to school until they're ready. So the practicing at home is going to make a difference, right? So keep practicing, and if your child is then understanding, okay, once this thing's on my face, it must stay on my face, then you can send the child back to school. Some parents are concerned about the length of time you can spend in a mask. We're not worried about that. So this whole thing of people fainting and so on is not to do with the mask itself. It's probably something else. So the doctors that work in the TB hospital, where there's MDR TB, they wear masks all day, and they wear those N95 masks that really cover everything, and they're fine. So we're not worried about that. But practicing is important. This weekend is your chance, and for the later grades, we have weeks to practice. So this is now your chance to get your kids out, take them to the shops, show them what's done, and then just make them see, you're not the only one wearing a mask. Everyone's wearing a mask, and this is how our new lives are going to be until the pandemic is behind us.
Thank you for that. And I think it's, again, it's just practicing and making this work. We don't have all the answers of making this easier. I'm going to start going to the chat and asking our experts. And Dr. Masay, I'd like to start with you. There's a question here. What should school leadership do to better support or help prepare teachers to deal with the mental health of learners coming back? What can schools do better to support our teachers during this time?
Okay, so there's a wonderful organization called the Collaborate for Academic and Social Emotional Learning. The acronym is CASEL, C-A-S-E-L. And CASEL is a global organization. And if you jump onto their website, they are the people who have put together a framework for social and emotional learning skills. So if we can, because, reality is that anxiety interferes with learning. So we first need to deal with anxiety. Once we've done that effectively, then we can teach our children the curriculum that needs to be done. And we do need to do that. So let's take first steps first, deal with anxiety, and those social and emotional learning skills are absolutely vital. Now more than ever, we need to equip our teachers and our children with social and emotional learning skills. Castle, as I say, have got a website out. Yes, it is not South African specific, but on the list of resources that you'll get later on, I think, Cassie, yes, from this webinar, there's going to be some websites that you can get onto, and some articles that have been written specifically for the South African learning environment. We really are, I'm on the international panel of working with social and emotional learning skills, and worldwide, we are really beginning to see that this is the most important thing that we need to be equipping our children with at this time, and then of course going forward to become responsible citizens in the workplace and in society itself. So that's one answer. There are many more, but I think that's where we should start.
Could I add on here, Dr. Marseille, and maybe just also suggest that, you know, from an emotional point of view, I think some of the questions that I've seen on the chat is, you know, what happens to teachers' stress levels and their anxieties and how that might influence their teaching and being with kids, and that's completely understandable. And I think schools, you know, as organizations should be thinking about how to support their teachers while they're at school transitioning back. And I really think they could make spaces for like debriefing sessions for teachers, for example, where teachers can go and just talk about their concerns. Sometimes just speaking in a supportive group helps, you know, and I think that really should be a focus, that teachers can come and say, you know, my job is really hard now. It was hard before, but like with extra, all this PPE, all these things, it's really tough. And I think as moms, if they're moms, as teachers, just let them support one another, but create spaces. You know, let's not forget that our educators have to go home to, you know, and like leave that hat at school and go home to their family. So let's help them just debrief a little bit.
Yes, and I think on that point, Cassie, it might be prudent for us to mention at this point that we are going to, through SADAG, start an educator and teachers support session where you, because I believe that a teacher is, and I'm going to use a metaphor here, a teacher is a little bit like a scrambled egg. You know, there's the white part of the egg and there's the yolk, the personal and the professional. And as teachers, we can't really separate the personal from the professional. It just, it's the two lives are so inexorably intertwined. So we are going to start a support session for educators and teachers once a week, which is going to be a sort of reboot or a recharge session, so that you as educators can engage in your own personal need to fill your own cup, or put your own mask on, your oxygen mask on, so that you can help other people.
And I think the mental health of teachers and educators was important before COVID, and often an area that we never see teachers as needing help. You know, they're always there presenting, giving, and not enough is given as support to them too. And I think, again, one of the magic things that have come out of COVID is really forcing that this is an opportunity to make it a priority and to talk about it. And, you know, I also urge, with schools going back next week, there's this flurry of teachers and schools working on planning and curriculums and PPE and social distancing. You know, it's all the protocols, and we forget the mental health of it all, where it affects so many South Africans. And we will be sharing about that new online group for teachers and educators to connect and to just come together and share, which is another great resource. But every school can put that together with their teachers. Every group, fraternity, community. I really encourage people to create more platforms that we can have those open discussions and provide support. It's so important, even beyond this webinar, beyond COVID, is we have to provide more support and compassion. Even though we have the question here on like, how do we manage, with being a matric in grade 12, you've worked your entire schooling career to get to this point, and you have these major milestones that you dream about, your matric dance, your 40 days, all of these different things. And now because of COVID-19, that doesn't happen. How do we manage those disappointments, that loss? What can a parent do? And how do we help our teenagers with this?
Well, look, I think this is the time to be having real conversations with our children and Cassie about the future, how the future is going to look different. And I think this is a great time as well to teach kids about when things don't go the way that you want them to go. So what happens when you get to matric and you fail and you have to repeat a year? What happens when you get to varsity and you fail a year and you have to repeat a year? So this is the time to prepare your kids for that. And I think it's important. When I look, certainly for myself, when I look at my journey of how I ended up in medicine, I mean, it took me 10 years because I failed the equivalent of matric in Zimbabwe, and I had to repeat. And at the time, it was a harrowing experience. I was very ashamed and so on, but it gave me resilience. So this is a good time to speak about all of those things that, what, my child, life doesn't always work out in the way that we want it to, but you might have to repeat next year, and that's okay. Because when you start working or when you've achieved your dream, no one's going to ask and say to you, well, Cindy, is it true that you failed your A-levels in 1994? Or is it true that you failed genetics in varsity in second year? No one actually cares about those things. So this is a good time to start talking to our kids about that. And they have to repeat, and they'll have to repeat next year. It's not easy, but at least it's an everybody problem. I keep coming back to that. That's the comforting thing for me, is that we're all in this together.
And I think also, add to that, yes.
Sorry, I'd like to add on to that. And this concept of hope, it's such an important thing that we have hope, and that we instill hope in other people. So, and it's not about unrealistic hope. It's not about, I hope I win the lotto. We need to have active strategies of hope. And this is one of the hobby horses that I like to ride. There are 4 constructs of hope. Attachment. So I need to make sure that I'm attached to people that are uplifting and supportive for me, that walk the journey with me, and that help me along the way. It's about mastery. What can I do? What do I need to learn how to do to make my situation better? So mastery is about competence and confidence and having control over myself, because I might not have control over COVID, and we don't, but we do have control over ourselves. And then the third construct of hope is about survival. And survival has 5. It has a handful of strategies. So the first strategy is, can I stay calm? Do I stay calm? How do I stay calm? What do I need to do in order to be calm? Do I have a plan? What can I change about myself or the situation so that it becomes easier to manage? Where do I get help from? And where do I draw my inspiration from? So those are the 5 survival strategies that are in a part of hope. And the last one is about spirituality, which has nothing to do with religion. It has to do with my values and my beliefs and meaning of life and how I'm going to move forward. So hope is a very important strategy. In fact, I think it's the strategy that we need to use to get through this thing together.
And I'm sorry, I was going to add in, Cassie, before you wrap up.
No, please do.
Dr. Marseille, that that hope is really the ending off of, we're actually going through a grieving process. And I think a lot of kids are grieving the fact that they can't do matric dance, that they might not see their friends, that they might not pass a year. And all of us, we're grieving the loss of what used to be and how things used to be, and having to adjust to this new normal. And I think hope comes in where we need to just focus on what we can take control of now. So yes, we can't change the fact that we've missed matric dances, but how else could we get closure? How else could we, make sense and bring meaning out of what's happening to us right now? And I think it's important for people to be compassionate towards kids and each other, because it is a really hard time.
Yeah, we have to be kind. We just have to keep remembering to be kind to each other.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think also just managing expectations. And out of all of this, the biggest theme I'm hearing is connecting and having conversations. And as a parent, we don't have to have all the answers. I mean, we're also learning and being honest about that and saying, okay, well, let's learn, let's do this, or this is what works for me. One of the questions I saw in the chat is you've got a parent who's managing their own anxiety and mental health issues, and they're battling to cope during lockdown, which we know the huge impact on mental health during this time. How do they then look after their child if they're not coping themselves? And Candace, maybe I can pose that to you. What can a parent do if they're not coping mentally? How do they then equip and help their child?
I think we focused a lot on this webinar in terms of how we can and tips to help parents, for parents to help kids. But I think it's also about what are your resources as an individual, you know, so who do you turn to? I know Dr. Cindy spoke about a friend that has been quite supportive. Often we need to turn to people and ask for help. A lot of people do struggle to say, I need help or I'm struggling. And I think the key is to identify that actually I haven't been okay, or yes, my mental health has been affected by this, and reaching out for that help to people that can offer help. There's many online resources that parents can turn to. I mean, SADAG in itself, South African Depression and Anxiety Group in itself, offers so much support for parents, free online resources for parents to go to, and to turn to mental health professionals if you've got relationships with therapists or other supportive people that you can go to just to have some debriefing or a bit of emotional support. It's important to take control of your own daily routines, make sure that you're feeding yourself and getting good night's sleep and focusing on things that you can control, like hobbies and doing other things other than just being in that anxious space if you are.
And I think that's, again, it's learning these tips and tools. And I'm always just so humbled, even just watching the chat, how many people they're sharing resources, tips, websites. And again, I think we have to find our village and find out how do we grow and support that village and really reaching out for help. You know, in South Africa, and Dr. Cindy, we've had many discussions about the stigma of talking about mental health and anxiety and stress and panic. And the more we talk about it, you actually find that people can learn from it. I mean, is that we're too afraid. And I think especially as teachers, they've often seen like they can't talk about their own mental health. It's not considered. They just have to carry on and look after their learners. Parents are managing. And it's kind of just being kind, being safe, and just really being compassionate during this time. You know, we've done a poll and people have been filling in, and I just wanted to give some of the results. So the question we asked is, do you think learners, educators, and school staff are emotionally ready to go back to school? And 12% said yes, 50% said no, and 30% say unsure. And I think that's really true to how we feel. And again, we're not equipped to deal with this. This is all new and different. And I think hoping that from today's discussion, again, it is recorded, so we will be able to share the link. Please share it. Watch it again and again and again. All the websites, and we're going to share some resources after this of really helpful articles for parents, how to talk about COVID, how to talk about the virus, how to talk about putting on a mask. You know, the practical things that we don't have the answers to. Keep them on your phone, print them, share it with people, go back to them the whole time. You know, develop your library of information, I think is really useful. I know we can probably talk on forever and a day on this topic, and I really just want to answer a couple of more questions and pose it to the expert panel before we look at closing. This is, again, hoping a discussion that we can continue in various platforms, probably going forward, I think would be very helpful. And we will make sure that all the resources are available, both in the article after the session and on SADAG's website for everyone to refer to. One of the themes that we've been hearing a lot is, you know, our response to COVID and this risk strategy that our government is following, that this is a marathon. It's not a race.
Yes.
And my expert from last week was saying that this is also a relay race. And it's having to share those resources and start that communication. When we're looking at the steps to come in future months of when we should, as a parent, be concerned, maybe Candace, what are some of the symptoms that we should be concerned about if we're consistently seeing this in our children? What should we do, and when do we know that we need more professional help?
I think it's important for for parents to know that kids, especially younger kids, often show behaviorally that things are changing, that something's bothering. Older kids might be able to express, I'm not in a good space, I'm anxious, I can't stop thinking about stuff. So it really just depends on the ages of the kids, but what to look out for as a general rule. Anything, I always say to parents, anything that's out of character. So anything that impedes or affects their functioning, their daily functioning. So if they're a social child and they withdraw because they don't want to see friends anymore, that could be a sign, in combination with I'm distracted, I can't think, or I can't concentrate, or my memory at school's not that great at the moment. It might be signs of anxiety. Things like constant physical pains, headaches, tummy aches are classic examples of where anxiety presents in kids. Change in sleep or eating behaviors. There's many routine stuff that you can see. If kids are acting out of character, their functioning is going to be affected. And I think if that continues for a while, so it's normal during some circumstances, like transitioning back to school, you might see regressions, you might see clinginess, you might see tearfulness. It's all understandable. But if it prolongs and you can see that your child is distressed for some time, those are signs that it's then going into that excessive worry, potential anxiety.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone that's posted questions. I know we're not able to get back to every single person, but we will look at answering some of this in the article post. And this also helps to guide us what we as SADAG and other organizations that have been on this session. It's been really great to see Dr. Omar from the Teddy Bear Clinic, who's been sharing resources and tips and tools. For all these organizations, we can actually learn what the issues are so that we can actually develop what support services we can put in place. I really want to come to the experts as your last comments, your last message of hope, or your tips or tools or resources. Any closing remarks? I'm going to come and start with you, Dr. Cindy. Anything that we could leave as a fellow mom, as a doctor, and someone who's on social media? Any last remarks?
I think my remark it's that so social distancing, wash your hands, wear your mask, and use your hand sanitizer if you can't wash your hands. And if we just stick to those principles, we should be okay. So don't forget those. Those still stand. Nothing has changed there. So stick to those principles of preventing the spread of COVID-19.
Thank you. Dr. Marseille, any last tips? I know your passion is always educators and teachers. For them going into the battlefield next week or prepping online, any last tips of encouragement?
Yes, look after yourselves. You are essential service providers. Please look after yourselves, because if you don't look after yourselves, then you're not going to be able to take care of other people. Put your masks on first. And the second thing that I would love to see us all doing is pooling resources as much as we can. Let's collaborate. We're all in this together, and if we row our boats together towards one direction, we'll all get there. And let's row with the knowledge that we have an end in mind. This too will pass, and we'll come out of it. I'm utterly convinced that through adversity, we learn to thrive.
Thank you for that. It's really inspirational. It's almost like a Rocky song that we're going into. And I urge people to play this on Monday, is that we can do this. And I think, as a parent yourself, Candace, and with my own small kids, and, we have all the facts, and any tips for parents and even just for children going into this? Any last comments?
Please be gentle on yourselves as parents. I think let's be compassionate. Everyone's feeling things. Our kids are feeling things. Please don't be too nitpicky and too, oh, is this a problem? Is that? Please be a bit forgiving and a bit of a grace period. Kids are struggling and we need to just help them through it. Please be mindful in terms of picking up on things, talking to kids. Do not be afraid to talk to your children about their emotions, help label it, and just help them with some sense of predictability about what's coming. It's a lot of talking. It's a lot of practice runs, like Dr. Cindy said. Please implement those things.
Thank you. And again, we'll share all these resources, and everyone that has been sharing in the chat, We're going to pull all of those websites and great ideas and articles into one resource, and we hope to build on it. And I encourage people to please, if you've got something that's worked for you, a new app, a website, an article, please do share it with us. And you're welcome to email it at office@anxiety.org.za. You can also visit our website at sadag.org. These discussions are so important, and it just shows you how complex, difficult, and how much there's so much to talk about. And I hate that it's only an hour, but I really do encourage, going into this all together, that we continue having these conversations beyond this webinar, that we share, we start discussions, we share resources, we try to figure and cope together, because together we can figure it out and we can just go through the storm together. I just wanted to thank Mail and Guardian for giving us the platform, and to our generous sponsors, Dr. Reddy's, for really helping us to have these important conversations where normally mental health doesn't make the agenda and isn't the priority. And this is why it's so important to have these conversations, because it affects so many of us. Again, all of our contact details are under offers. Again, there's a toll-free helpline that you're welcome to call for any mental health support, 0800 21 22 23, or visit the website. I want to thank, and with being physical distance and not social distancing, I want to thank the experts for your invaluable insight, your time, sharing of your own experience. I really do value it. And I look forward to working with you more as we, uncover this topic. And to everyone who's joined us from around the country and from overseas, thank you so much for coming and sharing and just being in this space. I look forward to doing a lot more. So everyone, have a wonderful weekend and good luck next week. I hope you feel a little bit more prepared, or at least you've got a lot of homework this weekend. So thank you, everyone. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, everybody.